You know, sometimes life throws danger at you when you least expect it, and there's no warning, no time to prepare, no way to defend yourself. That's exactly what happened one scorching afternoon in a sprawling vineyard in California. The sun hung high in the sky, beating down on the rows of grapevines that stretched for miles, casting long, distorted shadows on the dusty soil below. Miguel, a migrant worker, was midway through his shift. Sweat trickled down his back, his hands calloused and worn from tending the vines, carefully pruning and checking the grapes for ripeness. He was exhausted but focused, thinking about the rest of the day and the journey home. At first, everything seemed routine. The vineyard was quiet except for the occasional hum of a distant tractor and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. Birds darted between the vines, and the faint smell of sun-warmed grapes filled the air. Miguel moved from row to row, trimming, inspecting, occasionally wiping the sweat from his brow. He didn't see it at first, didn't hear it, until a sharp crack in the underbrush made him freeze. He turned slowly, squinting into the shadows, and that's when he saw it. A wild boar, massive, tusks glinting, eyes full of aggression, barreling straight toward him. Miguel froze, his heart hammering. There was nowhere to run. The narrow rows of grapevines funneled him like a corridor, perfect for a predator to corner him. Every instinct screamed danger, but his body felt heavy, paralyzed by shock. The boar snorted and charged again, hooves pounding the dry soil, nostrils flaring, tusks aimed low and deadly. Miguel's stomach dropped. He realized, in that instant, that if he didn't move, but he couldn't, he could be seriously injured or worse in seconds. That's when Atlas moved. Atlas is a great Pyrenees, a mountain of a dog, white as snow with thick fur that glistened in the sunlight. Massive, strong, and intelligent, Atlas had been raised on the vineyard to guard the land, the people, and the livestock. But he wasn't just a guard dog. He had a mind of his own, instincts sharpened by years of observation and training. When he saw Miguel in immediate danger, Atlas's entire body tensed. Ears pricked, tail stiff, eyes locked on the boar. Within a heartbeat, he surged forward, barking loudly, a deep, commanding sound that reverberated through the vineyard, startling both Miguel and the boar. Atlas positioned himself between Miguel and the wild boar, massive paws digging into the dry soil, muscles coiled like springs. He barked again, a warning, a declaration, a boundary. The boar hesitated for just a fraction of a second, and that was enough. Atlas lunged, meeting the boar head-on, using his size to shove the animal off balance, his weight redirecting its path while keeping Miguel out of reach. Dust kicked up around them as paws struck the dirt, hooves skidded, and leaves scattered in the sudden chaos. Miguel could hardly process what he was seeing. The dog he had always admired from afar, gentle, calm, almost lazy on the cooler mornings, was now a fierce protector, moving with purpose and precision. Every lunge, every shove, every bark was deliberate. Atlas anticipated the boar's movements, pivoted to block flanks, nudged Miguel gently when possible to indicate a safe step, all while controlling the wild animal's momentum. It was like watching a masterclass in instinct, intelligence, and courage rolled into one magnificent creature. The vineyard seemed to shrink around them. The rows of grapevines that had appeared peaceful and familiar now formed walls, funneling the boar and the dog into a tense corridor. Dust swirled, sunlight bounced off leaves, and the air was thick with the sounds of growls, barks, and thundering hooves. Miguel crouched low behind Atlas, sweat running into his eyes, trying to stay out of the boar's line of attack. He could feel the heat radiating off Atlas's massive body, muscles flexing under the fur, eyes fixed on the threat. Minutes, or maybe it was seconds, it was hard to tell, passed in a blur of chaos. The boar charged again, tusks low, aiming for Miguel. Atlas met it head-on, using his body as a shield, his weight and size forcing the boar back. He barked sharply, circling, controlling the animal's movements, forcing it to reconsider its next attack. Miguel inched backward slowly, following Atlas's lead, every movement guided by the dog's positioning and signals. The bond between man and dog in that moment was almost tangible, silent, instinctive, and life-saving. Atlas's movements were not reckless, they were calculated. Each time the boar lunged, Atlas responded, dodged, pushed, and repositioned. His paws struck the ground with precision, his teeth flashed in warning, his growl deep and authoritative. Miguel could barely breathe as he watched, utterly dependent on Atlas's skill and loyalty. Dust coated his arms and face, his hands scraped against leaves and soil, but he was alive, and every second it was because Atlas had intervened. The tension continued to escalate. The boar tried to flank Miguel from the side, hoping to catch him in a vulnerable moment. Atlas pivoted instantly, intercepting the animal, nudging it back toward the open vineyard, away from the worker. The boar snorted, frustrated, but Atlas held his ground. Every bark, every push, every calculated movement kept Miguel safe. The vineyard workers nearby, who had been watching from a distance, began running toward the scene, shouting warnings, but Atlas maintained control, ensuring Miguel wasn't in immediate danger until they arrived. Dust hung thick in the air, mingling with the scent of sun-baked soil and crushed leaves. Birds had scattered from the vines, leaving the vineyard eerily quiet aside from the sounds of the confrontation. Atlas kept the boar in check, circling, pushing, barking, guiding Miguel towards safety. The massive dog's body was covered in sweat and dirt, yet he remained focused, vigilant, and unyielding. Miguel had never felt more dependent on another being in his life, never felt such a raw mixture of fear, awe, and gratitude. By the time the other workers arrived to help, Atlas had already forced the boar to retreat slightly, buying enough time for Miguel to crawl toward the edge of the vineyard. The animal hesitated, unsure of how to proceed against a dog that matched its strength and outmaneuvered it at every turn. Atlas's stance remained firm, his eyes locked on the boar, tail flicking but body tense. He had done his job, but his vigilance never wavered. Miguel finally reached safety, leaning heavily on Atlas's side, breathing hard, heart still racing. He looked up at the massive dog, eyes wide, voice shaking, whispering, thank you for saving me." Atlas nudged him gently with his snout, a silent acknowledgement of his duty completed, but still alert to any lingering danger. The vineyard owner and the other workers arrived moments later, their eyes widening in disbelief at the scene. They had heard of dogs protecting livestock or guarding property, but never had they witnessed a great Pyrenees face off with a wild boar to protect a human with such precision, intelligence, and bravery. Paramedics and supervisors quickly tended to Miguel, checking his wounds and ensuring he was okay. Atlas stayed close, still alert, still scanning for threats, his body heavy but posture unwavering. Dust clung to his fur, muscles trembled with exertion, but his mind remained sharp, his instincts unerring. Miguel was alive, unharmed in the most critical way, and it was entirely because of Atlas. For Miguel, that afternoon changed everything. He had witnessed courage, loyalty, and intelligence in its purest form. He had seen a dog put himself in harm's way repeatedly, without hesitation, to protect a human being. And in the quiet moments afterward, as he rested in the shade of the vines with Atlas lying protectively at his side, he realized that heroism does not always roar or demand recognition. It sometimes comes on four paws, with a heart full of loyalty, a mind full of strategy, and the courage to act when every second counts. The vineyard had become a chaotic battlefield. Dust swirled around Atlas's massive paws as he squared off against the wild boar, every muscle in his enormous frame coiled with tension. Miguel crouched behind him, adrenaline coursing through his veins, heart pounding in time with the thundering hooves of the boar. It was a surreal scene, the rows of grapevines, normally peaceful and orderly, now framing a life-or-death confrontation. The boar charged again, tusks flashing, aiming straight for Miguel. Atlas moved with astonishing speed for a dog his size. He met the boar head-on, his body pivoting to deflect the attack, paws striking the soil, forcing the boar to sidestep. Dust exploded around them, leaves rustled violently, and the vineyard seemed to shrink to the narrow corridor between the vines. Miguel could barely process what he was seeing. Every action of Atlas was deliberate. Every bark, every shove, every pivot served a purpose. Keep Miguel safe, control the boar, buy time. Atlas's intelligence was on full display. The boar lunged from the side, trying to catch Miguel in a vulnerable moment, but Atlas anticipated it, pivoted, and intercepted, using his massive chest to block the animal's momentum. He barked sharply, a commanding, deep sound that echoed through the vineyard, signaling dominance. The boar paused, snorted, assessing the enormous dog that matched its strength and outmaneuvered it at every turn. Miguel's hands were scraped, his clothes torn from pushing through the vines, but he stayed low, trusting Atlas completely. The dog's movements guided him step by step, nudging him in safe directions, keeping the boar from lunging directly. Each second was a delicate dance of strategy and instinct, Atlas using both brain and brawn to keep Miguel alive. The boar was relentless. It charged, tusks aimed, swiping, attempting to push past Atlas's defense. But Atlas was equally relentless. He dodged, pushed, pivoted, and used his weight to control the boar's path, preventing it from reaching Miguel. Every maneuver was calculated. He didn't bite recklessly, didn't overextend himself, but applied pressure and intimidation with perfect precision. Miguel, in awe, could see the raw intelligence in Atlas's eyes, the awareness of danger, and the unwavering focus on the human he had sworn to protect. Time became a blur. Dust, sweat, and adrenaline mixed, the air thick with tension. Birds had scattered, the wind rustled violently through the grapevines, and the sun beat down on the chaotic scene. Atlas never let the boar get closer than a few feet to Miguel. He circled, barked, and lunged strategically, always forcing the boar to reconsider each move. Miguel inched backward, every step guided by Atlas, trusting the dog implicitly. He realized that without Atlas, he would have had no chance at all. At one point, the boar tried to flank from behind a vine row. Atlas pivoted with astonishing speed, intercepting the animal before it could reach Miguel. The sheer precision, timing, and control were incredible. The boar attempted a desperate charge, tusks aimed at Atlas, but the dog met it head-on, using his massive chest and paws to redirect the animal. He growled and barked, a constant warning, asserting dominance without striking to injure. He was there to protect, not to harm unnecessarily. Miguel could feel the heat radiating off Atlas's body, muscles flexing under the thick fur, eyes locked on the boar with unwavering focus. Every lunge, every pivot, every subtle shift in Atlas's weight created a barrier Miguel could rely on. He took a careful step back, guided by Atlas's presence, closer to the edge of the vineyard where help might arrive. The vineyard seemed alive with tension. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig added to the suspense, and the air smelled of dust, earth, and the wild scent of the boar. Hours, or what felt like hours, passed in a blur of motion. Atlas remained unyielding, coiled and alert, muscles trembling with exertion but never faltering in focus. The boar became frustrated, its charges less precise, hesitation creeping into its movements. Atlas exploited every hesitation, nudging it back toward the brush, controlling its momentum, always keeping Miguel out of harm's way. Finally, the vineyard workers arrived. Their voices echoed across the rows, and their presence startled the boar. Atlas, still standing between Miguel and the animal, kept a watchful eye, ensuring the boar didn't make a final desperate charge. The wild boar, recognizing it was now outnumbered, retreated into the undergrowth, snorting and stamping the dirt, leaving Miguel unharmed. Miguel collapsed to the ground, leaning heavily on Atlas. Thank you for saving me," he whispered, trembling. Atlas nudged him gently, tail wagging, still alert, ears flicking, scanning the vineyard. He had fought tirelessly, keeping a dangerous predator at bay, protecting a human being from serious injury. Sweat and dirt clung to his fur, muscles sore, but his mind remained sharp, instincts fully engaged. The vineyard owner arrived moments later, breathless, assessing the scene. He knelt beside Miguel and Atlas, voice filled with awe. "I've seen dogs protect livestock, but I've never seen anything like this. That dog saved a life today." The workers, paramedics, and supervisors echoed similar sentiments, all marveling at Atlas's intelligence, courage, and loyalty. Miguel's injuries were minor, thanks to Atlas's intervention. His cuts and scrapes were treated, and though his adrenaline still surged, he felt a deep, unshakable gratitude. He had witnessed true heroism, one that did not require words or recognition, but action, intelligence, and a heart committed to protecting another life. Atlas's body was still tense, though his breathing slowed. He had fought, dodged, and controlled the boar without reckless aggression, using strategy, strength, and instinct. Dust and sweat clung to his thick white coat, but his eyes remained bright, focused, and calm. Miguel rested beside him, finally realizing the depth of what had just happened. Without Atlas, he would not have survived. The incident became the talk of the Vineyard community. News spread quickly of a great Pyrenees confronting a wild boar to save a human. People were amazed, not just at the dog's physical power, but at his intelligence, restraint, and unwavering loyalty. Atlas didn't attack blindly. He protected, controlled, and saved a life. Even days later, Miguel would walk past the vines, glance at Atlas, and remember that afternoon vividly. The dust, the heat, the chaos, all moments forever etched in his memory. Atlas had taught him what loyalty, courage, and instinct truly look like. That dog didn't wait for commands. He acted, protected, and persisted, demonstrating the extraordinary bond that can exist between humans and animals. By the time the wild boar had finally retreated into the undergrowth, the vineyard seemed to exhale a long, collective sigh. Dust settled on the leaves and soil, sunlight bounced off the ripening grapes, and the air, heavy with tension moments ago, began to feel calm again. Miguel, still trembling and covered in dirt and scratches, slowly lowered himself to the ground, leaning heavily against Atlas's massive side. The dog remained alert, massive frame tense, ears flicking, eyes scanning for any lingering threat, but for the first time since the attack began, Miguel allowed himself to breathe. He was alive, and it was entirely because of Atlas. Thank you so much," Miguel whispered, voice cracking, fingers gripping Atlas's thick fur. Atlas nudged him gently with his massive snout, tail flicking slowly, a subtle but unmistakable acknowledgement. He had done his duty, protecting a human being from danger, yet he remained vigilant, eyes still tracking the retreating boar. For Miguel, that gentle nudge was more than reassurance. It was a lifeline, a signal that he had not only survived but was being watched over by one of the most loyal, intelligent creatures he had ever encountered. The vineyard workers and supervisors, who had arrived moments later, crowded around. They were visibly shaken, awe and disbelief written across their faces. One of the older workers muttered, "I've seen dogs protect livestock and property, but never a dog fight a wild boar to save a human. Incredible." Others nodded, some wide-eyed, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Atlas, despite his exhaustion, maintained a protective stance, ensuring that Miguel remained out of harm's way, demonstrating the kind of intelligence and situational awareness that only a highly trained and instinct-driven dog can possess. Paramedics quickly assessed Miguel's injuries. Scratches and scrapes covered his arms and legs, dirt caked into cuts, his shirt torn from navigating the vines during the confrontation. But the critical thing was this: he was alive. Every paramedic, supervisor, and worker who had witnessed the scene understood that without Atlas, Miguel would likely have suffered far worse. The Great Pyrenees had controlled the situation with skill, strength, and strategy, guiding Miguel through a near-fatal encounter with a wild animal that few humans, even experienced workers, could face. In the following days, the vineyard owner ensured Atlas received extra care. A deep cleaning to remove dust and debris from his thick white coat, nutritious meals to restore energy, and long walks to stretch sore muscles. Despite the heroism he had displayed, Atlas remained humble in his own way. He did not seek praise or attention. His satisfaction came from completing the task he had been born to perform, protecting those who could not protect themselves. Miguel, meanwhile, could not stop thinking about that day. The adrenaline, the fear, the sheer awe he felt watching Atlas act, it was unforgettable. He realized that courage and loyalty are not limited to humans. Sometimes, heroism walks on four paws, guided by instinct, intelligence, and an unshakable desire to protect. He had been given a second chance at life, and the reminder of that bond with Atlas was something he would carry forever. The story quickly spread throughout the local community. Neighbors, friends, and even news outlets highlighted the extraordinary bravery of Atlas. People marveled not only at his physical strength, but at the way he had used his intelligence, training, and instincts to control a dangerous situation without unnecessary aggression. It was a lesson in what loyalty and courage can look like in their purest form. Atlas had faced a predator capable of serious harm, yet every action he took was measured, precise, and focused on protecting Miguel. For the vineyard workers who had witnessed the event, Atlas became a symbol of dedication and bravery. Discussions about the incident revolved around more than just the fight itself. They explored the bond between humans and animals, the importance of trust, and the incredible capability of working dogs in life-or-death scenarios. Atlas had demonstrated something rare, the ability to make life-saving decisions under pressure, to act decisively, and to remain unwaveringly loyal in the face of danger. Miguel's recovery was gradual, but the experience had left a lasting impression. He often walked through the vineyard, glancing at Atlas, marveling at the quiet heroism that had saved him. He knew that he owed his life to a dog who had not hesitated for even a moment, who had assessed the threat, positioned himself perfectly, and acted with courage and intelligence. The bond between them grew stronger, unspoken but undeniable, a connection forged in shared danger, trust, and instinctual loyalty. In reflecting on that day, Miguel also realized the subtle lessons Atlas had taught him. Courage is not always loud. Loyalty does not always demand recognition. True heroism is often quiet, strategic, and rooted in unwavering commitment. Atlas had embodied all of these qualities, showing that in moments when seconds count, instinct and heart can make the difference between life and death. For those listening to this story, consider this. If someone you loved were in imminent danger, could you trust another being, human or animal, to protect them? Would you recognize the courage, intelligence, and loyalty even if it came from an unexpected source? Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever witnessed an animal act with bravery, with instinct and determination, saving a life or protecting someone? Stories like Atlas's remind us that heroism can come in many forms, sometimes silent, sometimes unexpected, but always powerful. Finally, for Atlas himself, the reward was simple yet profound. A life had been saved, a human had been protected, and he had fulfilled his purpose. That is all he needed. There were no medals, no headlines necessary. The vineyard, the rows of sun-warmed grapes, and the dust-covered soil stood as witnesses to his bravery. Miguel stood beside him, grateful beyond words, understanding that sometimes the most extraordinary acts of courage come on four paws, with eyes that never waver and a heart committed to protection. And when you picture that vineyard in California, the sun dipping toward the horizon, the scent of grapes heavy in the air, and Atlas standing tall beside Miguel, remember this. Courage is not always loud. Loyalty is not always visible. And sometimes, the bravest heroes are those who don't speak, but act when every second counts.